Thank you, Peter. I'm delighted to introduce Paul Atkins to the club. A number of you know that Paul is Chief Executive at Zealandia and has been with us for 2.5 years. When you hear Paul speak, you'll realise that New Zealand is his adopted country, and I think we're very lucky that he chose to come here in 1999 as Director of the British Council, and since then he's gone on to a very recognised career in science and technology, and right now he combines being the CEO of Zealandia with also chairing the board of the McDiarmid Institute and a number of startup activities. And that reveals, and you might be surprised, that Paul is not a biologist, a conservation restoration specialist, although he has a bit of a he's actually a Zealandia volunteer before he became the CE. Paul's a physicist by background, and we're, I think, lucky to have someone who brings a deep science application into technology and a very future-sighted view of what Zealandia can be in an emerging world. So, Paul, over to you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Denise. Thank you, Peter. Thank you all of you. It's a great privilege to be here. I'd like to tell you a story. It's a bit of an abbreviated story because it's been a story that's been building over several decades now and has quite a few more centuries to go. It's a story about which you will be well aware, and you are part, and I'm very grateful for that. So just to start this story, back in 1992, and I'm just going to move away from here for a moment, I actually have one of the original documents here. This is even got display copy written all over it. Natural Wellington was written in the early 1990s. And it was a document that, that was written by the Wellington branch of the Forest and Bird Society. And it described the state of biodiversity, the state of the ecology in the Wellington region. Some interesting facts came out of it. That was in fact, I ought to do a quiz. I ought to do a sergeant's quiz. Does anybody know what that is? It's 30. Thank you. 30 what? It's actually the total number of tui estimated to be in the whole Wellington region. That is the total number of pairs of kereru estimated to be in the total Wellington region. That, of course, is an extremely well-known date. Stuart's birthday. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to repeat that. That's the year that hihi, the stitchbird, went extinct on the New Zealand mainland. They were only left on one small offshore island. And so we had what had been termed at that stage by the author of that document an absolute basket case. And it was the foundation of that, it was the foundation that was formed by that document that led to this, a conservation project for the 21st century. This was written in 1992 and updated again in 1997. And it starts with that interesting word, imagine. And then Jim Lynch, who prepared that, went on to describe something that is very close to what I could point at and you could experience today. That is the number of hihi fledglings that we banded last year in Zealandia alone. This is a species that went extinct on the New Zealand mainland in 1885. There are still only between 3,000 and 6,000 of those birds left in the whole world. And we are the major source of new progeny for that species. And there are many others. And so the first chapter of this little story I'd like to tell you was an establishment chapter. And like all startups, whether those be commercial or non-commercial, startup organisations have their challenges. And the Karori Sanctuary Trust, Zealandia, was no exception. And we know that. But what I would like to say is that if I move to a more contemporary chapter of this particular story, that our organisation, and this is intentionally a double entendre, and that's probably tautology as well, isn't it? Our organisation is in transformation. We are not only transforming ourselves, but I believe very strongly that we are in the business of transformation. And that was written about us a couple of years ago. We didn't write it. I didn't even pay for it to be written. But that was written about us a couple of years ago. 1992, 2 or 3 pairs of keraru. 30 tui. Somebody said when I said that, I've got that number in my garden now. Drive on the back road past Otari Wilton. You see a keraru on every lamppost. We have signposts around Wellington now that have a keraru and a car saying, please slow down for keraru. This is an extraordinary change, and in an extraordinarily short period of time. There's one small indicator. I'm not going to say any more about that one small indicator, apart from we know there's not one of them. In fact, actually, I will say something else. We introduced 14 of them into Zealandia in 2002 and a few more in 2004. We've given up counting, but when we stopped banding them, we got up to 900 fledglings. There's another much bigger indicator. The saddleback, the tieke, also went extinct on the New Zealand mainland in the roughly 1880s, thereabouts, well over 100, 120 years ago. They are now breeding for the 3rd year in a row successfully in Pole Hill Gully outside of Zealandia. This is a bird that when it was last in Wellington, knew Wellington as a forest, not as a series of backyards. I'm going to give you a few more indicators, and this is a slightly different chapter to our story. If you would indulge me for a moment, I'm just going to tell you a bit of the business side of this particular story. And like all businesses, as I said earlier, like all startup businesses, there are challenges. There are challenges due to one's own internal desires to move at a certain pace, and there are challenges as a consequence of environmental factors. This is year to date, this year, up to February, our figures for total visits to Zealandia. 3 years ago, the largest number we'd had was just between 90 and 100,000 visitors. We have had over 88,000 visitors by February this financial year, that's to the end of June. For the last 2 years, we've had over 125,000 visitors, and it's likely to be up to 135,000 this year. We had over 4,000 visitors over the Easter weekend alone. We've got over 11,000 members as at February. We've had over 6,000 education visits as at the end of February. And those are some comments. We've got lots of nice comments. Another indicator, well over 4,000 cruise ship visitors booked on a tour. These are ones that book, not ones who then find their own way up via the cable car and call in. And you can see that the paid admissions, how they've risen from over the last 3 years. This is year to date. And I like that quote at the bottom, visiting Zealandia was the main reason for our trip to New Zealand. We get a lot of those, actually. And we get a lot of those for Wellington. You can see that our revenue is steadily increasing. But what's interesting there, and I'd like to point out, that as part of this story, the public contribution, if you like, the grant that we get from the City Council, which I should stress is an extremely important part of our relationships with Wellingtonians, our relationship with the Council, and it's extremely positive. But it's worth pointing out that we now earn 83% of our total revenue. We earn from our own activity. And that's risen steadily. And so if you like figures like this, it might be worth noting that this year the average subsidy per visitor from the grant that we get will drop down to just over $6 from $7, which is a substantial decrease. Another indicator, a couple of months ago we were awarded an ECA grant, and with the very, very important partnership now that we have with Meridian Energy, we are now replacing our old diesel shuttle buses, which provide free shuttle service from the city, around the city up to Zealandia and back, with 2 brand new fully electric vehicles. They'll be the first, we think, in New Zealand to be used as a fully electric passenger service 100% of the time, 364 days a year. And we were the proud winners of the Sustainable Business Network Environmental Award this year, and we were semi-finalists in the New Zealander Community of the Year Awards. So what is this telling me? What do I take from this? And that is that as an organisation, our current chapter, the chapter that we've been writing in the last 3 years, is a chapter that again is rather different to those that went before it. It's a chapter of an organisation that is making a contribution partly by running itself well, partly by running itself efficiently and effectively, but partly being able to measure value in different ways to different people who have themselves different measures of what constitutes value. We're able to do it economically, if you wish. We're able to do it socially, if you wish. We have nearly 600 volunteers working with us now. We're able to do it environmentally, of course. So, I'd like to very quickly, and I know I'm nearly out of time, just spend a little moment or two talking to you about the chapter we're currently writing. You'll be aware of Predator Free 2050, a New Zealand-wide initiative announced by the previous government. And you will be, of course, aware of Wellington, Predator Free Wellington. We think this is marvellous, of course. Why we think it's marvellous is because our goal is for nature richness. I haven't suddenly turned shy. A couple of years ago now, we published this document. It's called Living with Nature. It's our 20-year strategy. It's our strategy for the next 20 years. And in that, we talk about nature richness. And we think it's extremely important. And Predator Free is an extremely important step on that way. And we're playing an important role in that. That picture on the left there is our lead ranger for education, Darren, talking to schools in the Miramar Peninsula because, as you may know, predator-free Miramar is the first cab off the rank for Wellington, and we are now leading the part of that project for informing, empowering, educating and facilitating all the work that goes on with school kids on the peninsula. So, we seem to have gone from a basket case to a valley that managed to transform a city. We have been through a process of quite extraordinary transformation. And I'd like to finish by talking about this next chapter. I sincerely believe that visiting nature is not transformational. Turning the tide is. And I might just draw a parallel. If in Wellington all we did was visit an art gallery, would that make us a city of culture? I believe that actually we are what we are because it becomes part of how we behave. It becomes part of the very fabric of what we do and what we value and how we do it, how we support it, what we support. And I believe there's no difference with the natural world as it is to the arts or indeed to science. If I don't live my science, I simply visit the university once a week, so what? I believe what is truly transformational is that we are changing the way people think about and value the natural world, how we nurture it and how we live with it. And why I call that an inside-out approach is I just ask you to put your hand up last time you visited one of our faraway national parks. Let's say it's so far away, it's 40 minutes away, the Orongorongas. How many of you walked in the Orongorongas in the last 6 months? Great! But it's very few. In the Ruahinis, in the Tararuas, let alone further south down to our deep south beautiful national parks. I would contest that actually the extraordinary transformation we're going through, the inside-out transformation, is a transformation that is saying that we can utterly change the way we view the place we live from our cities outwards, from where we live outwards. And we are demonstrating that in Wellington. I suspect that Wellington is the only city in the world, certainly the only capital city in the world, where native biodiversity is increasing. I would challenge you to go and Google and find me another city, capital city, where that's the case. This is an extraordinary thing that's happening here. We are creating nature richness in our backyards. We're not concreting it over, and we don't have to concrete it over. So, living with nature, our strategy for the next 20 years. What does that mean? Well, it means that we will continue to run ourselves exceptionally professionally. We will continue to be able to demonstrate value environmentally, socially, economically. We will be able to continue to demonstrate value to our city and to our country. Of course we will. But it means even more than that. It means that we will continue to become a focus for people the world over who are trying to learn how to relive and re-engage with the natural world, because frankly, it's just plain good for us as human beings. There's plenty of research evidence to say that, and I can point you in that direction if any of you are interested. So we established and announced back in the end of January, the Zealandia Centre for People and Nature. Why that? Well, because visiting nature is not good enough. Yes, we are a place to visit. Yes, absolutely we are. But we're way more than that. We're a place to learn about how to re-establish the link between people and nature. And so this centre is a centre that combines a lot of the research we do. We've got around about 50 research projects underway right now. It's doubled in the last 12 months alone, covering everything from the intelligence of kaka through to the impact of the natural world and contact with the natural world on Alzheimer's patients, and everything in between, on ecotourism, on business management, everything. And we've got a whole load of citizen science wrapped up in there. All the work we're doing on our Sanctuary to Sea project, which looks at the link between Zealandia and the Kaifara, the harbour at Kaifara, taking the Kaifara water catchment. A project with 23 partner organisations that we're leading for the entire clean-up of that water catchment. This is not just about nature. This is about people and nature. And so I will finish and hopefully give you time for 2 questions. I'd like to invite you to join us, if you need the invitation at all, actually. I hope in many ways you don't feel you need the invitation, but I'd like to re-invite you anyway to join us in the next chapter of the transformation, because I think the next chapter is not just the transformation of a valley, or even the transformation of the birds we see flying around our city, but it's a deep transformation of the way we think about and live with nature. And I would like to very much invite you to continue the dialogue with me and my team about that, because there are plenty of really exciting projects that we're now embarking on that are really very much the next chapter. So thank you very, very much. Sorry, I've got over time.
We have time for just a couple of quick questions if somebody would like to ask a question.
What's the area of the Karori?
The area is inside the fence 225 hectares. Yes?
Yes, my name is Gloria, and we know very well what you're doing. Zealandia is a beautiful day trip, but even if the weather is poor, they might not be able to find a guide to go into the center, but that, the visitor center with all its displays are more than worth just going there. However, we hear that there's myrtle rust attacking trees. How will the treatment of that type of thing impact the bird life?
These are, to be perfectly honest with you, there's a whole load of unknowns in that. Thank you for the question. We do know that myrtle rust has been evident in Australia, for example, for quite a while, and that there is evidence that the system naturally comes to some sort of balance. Yes, myrtle rust is fast approaching. It's been found within Wellington now. We haven't yet discovered it within Zealandia. I suspect that it will mean that, and this is conjecture really, that it will mean that we will have to take a close look at some of our particularly nectar-feeding birds, the hihi in particular, which are very susceptible to changes in the balance of flora in the valley. It may mean that we have to continue a more strict and closer regime of supplementary nutrition for certain species. How will it impact on the flora? Yet to be seen. It's something that a lot of people are currently working on very hard.
Okay. Thank you. Denise, would you like to thank SB?
Well, Paul, thank you very much for bringing us up to date with Zealandia's recent chapter and the one that we're now in. And I can hardly say this as chair of the Zealandia Chair Sanctuary Trust without a little bit of vested interest, but I know that your invitation to Rotarians to join the next chapter is a really sincere one. Now, I'm about to say thank you to Paul by giving him this very nice speaker thank you pack, which ironically includes a guest pass for Zealandia for a family visit. But I'm just going to put it out there, and Paul doesn't know I'm going to do this. He'd be happy to re-gift that token, okay, to somebody who would like to come on a daytime tour personally conducted by the chair of Zealandia, perhaps if you can't make it to the end of the month Rotary visit. So that'll come, of course, with a very generous donation. Thank you very much. It's available.